Right, hello everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. It is the top of the hour. It is the time to get started. So welcome again to the Go Global webinar series that continues with today's webinar, How to Sell Online in Mexico. It is a huge pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us wherever you are across the United States. We see log-ons and across Europe. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar. So let's get started. Today I have the huge pleasure of being here in Washington, D.C. in the offices of IBT Online, where we are also participating in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Trade Week. There are a lot of meetings today. After this webinar, I'll be going back there, where actually Mike Pence, Vice President of the U.S., is going to be addressing the chambers, combined chambers of commerce here. But today's webinar, I will be presenting the introduction here, and I'll be introducing Susanna Hardy, our Director of Client Services, on your screen, the bottom left there, and Anna Arroyo of ARNI Consulting Group on the bottom right. It is our pleasure to welcome you. Susanna is based over in London, and Anna is based over in Mexico City, and we are welcoming you using today's online technologies for today's webinar. We have a really informative and educational program. I think as you see the slide deck unroll, you'll be very impressed. Susanna and Anna have been working hard over the past weeks to put this together, and there's a lot of really useful information and a lot of takeaways all about how to sell online in Mexico. We hope to help you substantially in your wish to develop your businesses, brands, and sales in Mexico. So, a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Do know that this webinar is one of a series. It is called the Go Global Webinar Series, and it's all about helping you go globally online and use the web today to develop your businesses internationally. If you want to see the backlog, we've been doing this for 2+ years. Go to www.ibt.onl/resources/webinars. You'll find the history there, the on-demand library of webinars, and also all of the webinars that we're planning in the future. This webinar will be approximately 45 minutes. Brief introduction by myself, and then I will be handing over to Susanna and Anna, who are today's expert speakers. There will be time for questions at the end, so do look at there, as you see on your screen, please, on the right-hand side, questions. Click that little arrow, open it up, ask your questions, and we will do question time at the end. There is also a chat box, so don't hesitate, share your ideas, and we will get back and respond. At the end of this webinar, there will be a brief survey, so please do stay online for extra 10 seconds to give us some feedback vis-a-vis today's webinar. And finally, do know that we will be providing you a copy of this webinar recording on Friday. So in your inbox, in your email, you'll have that come in on Friday. So look forward to that. So that could be a weekend reading and listening. So let's get started. Let's introduce our two authorities for today's subject, Mexico and being online. So Susanna Hardy. Susanna Hardy is our host presenter from IBT Online. Lucky to have Susanna joining us today. Director of Client Services, Susanna heads up our global operations, focusing on helping companies grow their sales, their brands and businesses online globally. Susanna brings an expertise in international business development and, of course, the online world of websites and social media, and deploys that knowledge for our clients. Susanna has a career in international business and has lived and worked across in the US, it's up in New York, and in Europe, in London and Paris. Anna has been involved in international business throughout her career, working successfully with the US Commercial Services and, of course, Enterprise Florida. Enterprise Florida, the organization for helping trade and economic development in the state of Florida. Anna is the trade director for Mexico for Enterprise Florida. Anna has an MBA and business degree from the University of Mexico and Universidad Iberoamericana, and Anna has specialized in helping companies find their commercial feet and development in Mexico. 2 words on IBT. IBT is a private company. IBT, it stands for International Business and Technologies, and all of that online. IBT Online has been in business since 2002, providing website localization and international online marketing services, all about helping companies grow their sales, grow their brands and businesses globally. So without more ado, I'm now going to hand over to Susanna. It is Susanna's pleasure now to take us through and introduce us, and Anna. So let me hand over. Anna, Susanna, are you there? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John, and it's a great pleasure to be here today. As John was saying, I see that there's people from a wide variety of countries, which is always lovely to see. And our view is increasing, growing interest in Mexico. So what we're going to talk about today and really focus on, first Anna's going to give us an overview of the business world in Mexico, what you can expect to see in Mexico, what her experience has shown her in Mexico. And then I'm going to come back and talk specifically about the online environment. First of all, giving a sort of a landscape view on it, focusing then on the e-commerce side and what we call website localization and the specificities for the Mexican market, and in particular for social media and online marketing. Try to do this as pragmatically as possible, and so we decided to use some case studies wherever we can, and but we have also left some time at the end for questions, and as John was saying, we'd really encourage you to pop some questions into the question box there, and we'll curate afterwards. So I'd like to now pass the mic back over to Anna. Anna, if you're there.
I'm right here.
Perfect. There you go.
Thank you, Susanna. Well, thank you all for being here with us today, and thank you, John and Susanna, for the opportunity to teach you a little bit about Mexico. What I'm gonna try to do is give you a general overview. I know some of you already are doing business in Mexico, but it's always good to have some information that maybe you have missed. And for the newcomers, it's good for you to learn more about what Mexico can offer. I mean, our first slide is very basic, but I just want you to understand, for example, it's very important that you consider that Mexico is a Spanish-speaking country. So that's why it's very important that you have your website and everything on Spanish language and focus to the Mexican market. The other thing that is very important is the population. The number here is from the census from 2010. That has changed. Now we're almost close to 120 million people in Mexico. And of those, a lot of them are really new and young people who use the internet and the social media a lot. So that's a good way to sell into the Mexican market. And the last thing I want to say that Mexico is a huge country. We have 42 states, as you can see. It used to be 31, but just last year, Mexico City also became a state. In the next slide, I'm going to show you the map of Mexico, and it's very important for you to see how big Mexico is. In territory, we're almost close to 2 million square kilometers, so it's a huge area. It's not easy to access. If you want to cover the whole Mexico, it's very difficult just to have one representation or just one way of selling. So basically, we divide the country in different areas. The north area, the main city will be Monterrey, which is in the state of Nuevo León, and it's a very dynamic area with a lot of manufacturing going on and close to the maquiladora areas and close to the U.S. border. Now, if we go down, you will find Mexico City, which is a little tiny yellow, yellow in the middle of the country, and it's very important to also have business in Mexico because Mexico is still a centralized economy, and a lot of the registrations, a lot of all the, you have to deal with the government, it's best to have someone locally in Mexico City. Now, if you go to the west, you will go to the area of where Jalisco is, where is Guadalajara, and all the area of the Bajío area, which is now booming with the automotive industry. Another area to consider, and some people don't consider as much, but especially for the eastern United States, is the Yucatan Peninsula, where the city of Mérida is located. From the city of Mérida, you can target Campeche, Quintana Roo, the Cancun area, and all these eastern states of Mexico, Tabasco, and Veracruz. So it's also an important area to consider. And now if you have a website, it will be easier for you to access all this huge territory. Now, we're going to go into a little bit about the economy. I know you hear a lot about Mexico economy lately. Our GDP growth last year was, I consider, quite good. It was not what expected, but it was 2.3%. Now for the coming year, this 2017, at the beginning of the year, they start saying it was going to be 3.2, and then it has been going lower and lower since then. Part of it is because of the new U.S. administration, and the problem is that we don't know what's going to happen with the NAFTA negotiation. So that's really affecting the estimates for Mexico growth. So far, we did an excellent first semester. Our first trimester was 2.7, so it was quite good. So we're doing okay so far, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next, after August, after the negotiations of the NAFTA agreement. One of the biggest concerns is the inflation rate. As you can see, last year we had 3.26%. But this year has been really difficult because at the beginning of the year, we had a very high increase in the gasoline. And when you increase the gas prices, usually everything goes up, raw material and the end product at the end. So they estimate to be 5.35%. I think, honestly, it's going to be almost the double of last year. So it's really concerning for Mexico, the inflation rate. We have to control that. The Mexican bank is doing a lot to try to control it and see what happens with in the near future. Now, another thing to consider is the exchange rate. At the end of the year, it was really high, and even in November, before the U.S. elections, it was almost to $23 per peso. That was really concerning. Now it's going down. It's fluctuating between 20 to 80, 18, and in the last few weeks, it's going down. And I think a lot has to deal with the Mexico position against the U.S. government. Mexico is trying to be more tough. They're trying to really work and the negotiations to be fair for the NAFTA agreement. Next one, regarding political aspects. I think this is important because a lot of you don't know how Mexico is being, the political, how it goes. Mexico is a federal democratic republic, but what they do are the president's terms is 6 years. So every 6 years we change presidency. So it's important for you, if you're doing business with the government, to take that in consideration, because usually the president changes and all the governors and municipalities change almost at the same time. So you got to be very careful if you are working with the U.S. government. And we don't have re-elections. It's only 1 6-year term. So now let's talk about agreements, free trade agreements. Mexico not only has the...
Before we go, maybe we could just have a quick poll.
Okay.
We have a quick poll here.
Very happy to do that. Absolutely. Here, please, everybody, it is time to reach for your mics respectively, and here you go. Please participate in our poll that I am launching now. So there you go. Does your company already do business in Mexico? So please, is it yes with a local partner and online, with a local partner, or just online, or are you thinking about it? Now, I can give you some feedback here. I can tell you that 31% are saying yes with a local partner, a full 46% are thinking about it, and 7% are saying yes with a local partner and online. So that's very impressive. That's very interesting. With that, there's my little horn. I'm closing that first poll, and I'm thanking you very much indeed. I'm now going to close that and hand you back.
Okay, thank you, John. Now let's go back a little bit talking about Mexico international agreements. As you all know, we have the NAFTA agreement. We was the first one in place in 1984. Since then, Mexico started signing a whole bunch of agreements. We have in total 12 agreements, and we cover most of the territory of the world. As you can see with the colors, we have agreements with Central America, South America, except for Brazil and some other markets, but mostly we cover a lot of the South American countries, the main ones. And we have all with the European unions, completely the European unions, and with Japan and with the Australia. Now with the TPP, we hope to have more agreements in place and more markets to target, which is good. Mexico has not really put a lot of use of these free trade agreements. 80% of our exports go to the U.S. So that's why we're concerned about what's going to happen with the NAFTA. So what will happen with NAFTA? We don't know. We expect that everything will be okay. It's important to mention that the NAFTA is important for both economies and the Canadian economy as well. It's a totally integrated supply chain across many industrial sectors. Just to give you an example, for example, for Bombardier plant, they have a plant here in Mexico, in Querétaro. For one plant they're building, that parts go back and forth almost 7 times for one plane. So just think how integrated this relationship is. So it's very important, I think, for all of us to keep the NAFTA agreement. It has helped all our economies. For Mexico, has been booming for the automotive, aerospace industry, and electronics and computers, and that way the U.S. is getting a lot of goods at a very competitive price. Also, I mean, just in 1 minute, it equals 1 million of trade between both economies. So what's going to happen? We hopefully will be signed and we'll be having the agreement continued. Of course, they have to review the rules of origin and the e-commerce and internet, which was not in place when the agreement was signed 40 years back. One thing that Mexican government has been really pushing is that they're not going to deal with the NAFTA regarding the wall. That's going to be a totally independent thing. And the Mexican government is being very tough on that. In fact, for example, there's grain suppliers from the U.S. and the Mexican government, to avoid having dependent on grain from the U.S., they just did a trip last 2 months to look for suppliers in South America. So Mexico is not just waiting to see what's going to happen. They're being very proactive, and I think it's a very good position on the Mexican side. Now, as I mentioned before, some of the Mexico main sectors are booming, especially the automotive industry. It's a sector that's been growing, especially the last 20 years. And now we're producing almost to 3.5 million cars. Mexico is the 7th producer of cars in the world, and is, I think, the 2nd auto parts producer for the world. So it's a sector that is very active in Mexico, and it's very interesting because you can have a lot of other things around it, not just auto parts. I mean, there's software, is tooling, is raw materials. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. And by the year 2020, they hope to produce 4.5 million cars. In just 3 years more, 1 million units. Now, that's going to be a challenge, not only for the automotive industry, but also for the other sectors that are trying to grow. Is a problem that we're going to have is going to be infrastructure. Mexico will have to invest in the railroads, will have to invest in highways, seaports, and airports. And there's an opportunity there also for the other companies, especially with the new Mexico City airport. Next one, please. Now, if you're coming to the market, you're already here, I'm sure some of you have already done your homework, but if you haven't, it's very important for you to do a mixture of find not just one distributor to cover the market, but do a mixture of how to sell, have distributors, have agents, have dealers, have online sales. It's a mix to be able to cover the whole territory. Also, something very important is to understand how the Mexico legal system is. It's totally different from the U.S. So we always recommend to have a legal advice at your site. And also, very important when you sell into the Mexican market, make sure that you're going to get paid. So don't give credit terms right away. So make sure that once your sales are going constantly, then you're able to know your partner. You can start giving some credit. And also what we mentioned before is the cultural issues is very important, the language barrier. Now, before entering the market, of course, you have to do your market research. You have to make sure what is your competition in the marketplace. And also very important to consider the regulations. There's a lot of non-barrier regulations to come into the Mexican market. Labeling, for example, most of the products need to have a special labeling to come into the Mexican market. Some areas like medical, they do have to go through a regulation process similar to the FDI. We have our own FDI, which is called COFEPRIS. Also, you have to make sure the logistics issues is very important. So if you have everything in place, everything will go smoothly. If you don't do your homework correctly, sometimes the goods can stand on the border for maybe a week or more, even a month, and you will lose their merchandise. So make sure you have everything in place before you start selling into the Mexican market. Now, how are you going to sell to the market? That's up to you. The different ways of doing it, and it also depends how you're going to access it. Online presence, this is a great opportunity if you use the ITV solution, or if you want to have a establishment in Mexico, or a joint venture, or maybe just doing direct sales. or having a seller or agent in the market. Whatever you want to decide, you just got to make your strategy correctly. How you want to access the market. Make sure that you follow all the things you need to do, and we're here to help you. I mean, we can give you advices and help you how to access, depending on the product industry you want to enter. And the last slide I'm going to give you is very helpful resources that you can use to do some of the market research to enter the Mexican market. Of these, the ones that I think are very valuable is the first one, which is the Ministry of Economy, and the COFEPRIS if you're in the registration for medical devices. And one that has great Mexico information is the INEGI. INEGI is our statistics, national statistics entity for Mexico, but they have great too. I mean, they have mapping, it's amazing the information you can get from the INEGI. And also it's very important if you're coming to the market, make sure that you register your brand names in Mexico. To do so, you have to go to the INPI, which is the registration of trademarks in the Mexican market. Well, that's for me. That's all for me for the moment. I think we have another poll coming, right, John?
Absolutely. Anna, thank you so much. Those are indeed helpful resources. That is great. So we will be sending you this slide deck on Friday, so there you go. And meanwhile, I'm going to launch the next poll. So please, everybody, are you ready? Here you go, the poll. What is your main export challenge? Yeah, related to what Anna's been talking about. What do you think is your main export challenge for Mexico? Is it about local partners, logistics and supply, regulatory, or other? Let me give you some feedback. 50% are saying it's finding a lot of 55% are saying it's the local partner. That clearly is the main one. And 30% are saying it's regulatory, and some 17% are saying other. That was very interesting. I think, therefore, it's time to say thank you for that feedback. I'm going to close that poll and hand it back.
Thank you very much, John. Now we're going to talk about online. And I'm going to sort of try and start where Anna left off, just getting back to her point about the size of Mexico. I found this useful little map here. Mexico is nearly 3 times the size of Texas. That gives you some idea of just how large this place is. So one of the first things you're going to have if you're going online, if you're doing anything in e-commerce, and if it's B2B or B2C, is you're going to have logistic issues and infrastructure issues. And it's interesting. This has been dogging sort of the Mexican economy and certainly the Mexican e-commerce for some time. It is getting sorted, though. It is improving and getting sorted. And I think it's really interesting to follow some of the very big retail giants. Both Amazon and Walmart are investing billions of dollars in logistics and infrastructure spend, capital expenditure over the next 2 or 3 years. And Walmart, I think, is 1.4 billion over the next 2 years. They've already spent 4 billion since 2012. And Amazon have just announced also a similar amount. So that's the kind of, first of all, I think that gives you a great understanding of the confidence that some of the major retailers have in the Mexican market. And secondly, it shows you as well that these kind of platforms are being installed, are being built out into Mexico. And perhaps as companies can also start piggybacking some of that and taking advantage of it. On the right-hand side of this slide is just a sort of a graph to show you sort of internet accessibility and penetration rates. Now, Mexico historically has had a terrible penetration rate for internet. It was one of the lowest, or actually it was the lowest in the OECD for a long time. There's been a real marked change in the last 2-3 years. And you can see the growth, in fact, in 2015, there was a 16% uplift in the number of people having good internet access. And this is really followed by the consequence of government initiatives, falling prices in smartphone, and the build out of some broadband. So a good, a very much improving internet penetration rate as well. So those are the 2 big challenges. Well, the single biggest challenge, if you like, is infrastructure, both for internet accessibility and just logistics for the e-commerce. So I wanted to sort of get those 2 themes right in the start. Now, if we look on the upside of some of that, Now, we talked about low penetration rate of sort of 60% penetration rate. Well, that's still 65 million people. Some of the forecasts that we have in terms of growth are estimated, these are by eMarketeer and Statista and ATA Kearney, all talking about sort of 85 to 90 million people by 2019. So, continuing very, very strong growth. The other thing I think that interested me was just the concentration of the people. 3 cities, the 3 largest cities that Anna was talking about, that's 60% of all internet use in the country. So, if you are, say, a B2C, if you're looking at the consumer market, that's a very, that's a much more manageable thing to deal with in terms of your challenges and infrastructure. And I want to point out as well the favorable demographics. Mexico is a very young country, and the birth rates and such are such that it is a very favorable country for growing internet use. I think another point that I wanted to raise in terms of online is the fact that supply chains are becoming more complex, whether that's with NAFTA or without NAFTA. They are becoming more complex, actually favors online solutions to solving those complex issues. And we've seen this in a lot of other markets, and we're seeing it in Mexico too. This is really the subject of another webinar in terms of logistics that we can go on, but I wanted to raise it. It's important as well about how especially B2B are using the internet solutions for Mexico to try and streamline and simplify some supply chains. And then some of the very significant large capital expenditure we're seeing in the market, and I highlighted Walmart and Amazon, but they're by no means the only ones really investing in the Mexican market internet scene, whether it's rolling out broadband, putting in logistics centers. There's now better online banking, all kinds of things like that. So again, I think significant upside on that. So I wanted to say a few characteristics about the Mexico online market, and the most sort of the one that really hits you in the face is the use of smartphones. Smartphone, 77% of internet access in terms of time is by smartphone. And you see this in a lot of developing markets. You see this a lot of markets that they kind of like, they've leapfrogged something that I would have found more in the UK, for example. The UK experience was no internet was what you did at work first with a computer at work, and then eventually you got a computer at home and you did that. And smartphones have only existed since about 2005, 2007, really. So this is an enormous sort of leapfrog that Mexico has done straight into smartphones. Obviously, laptops and computers at home as well. But the fact that smartphones are so dominant, that has important repercussions, not only about how you build websites, but how websites are used, and particularly for social media, and I'll get on to that. I think the key to take away from this, though, is if you're using a smartphone to this level, then it is really a business tool. And that's, I think, the important part to remember. And we'll see how this feeds into some aspects of online use in Mexico. So again, just a sort of a quick overview then now of the e-commerce situation in Mexico. It, in a sense, has just really flourished with growing internet access. And you saw that previous slide about how that big bump in 2015 and 16, and we're having a very similar experience now with e-commerce, seeing again that huge 60% increase in 2015 just from better internet access. And I don't have, well, the numbers for 2016 are still a little bit shaky, but at least you get the feeling in terms of the growth from it. Numbers in 2016 show a similar sort of level of increase. The Mexican market was estimated at $12 billion e-commerce in 2015. It's something like $17 billion today. I think one of the things that's interesting as well is that it's a very much a young audience, and one who also likes to go and international. And above all, when a Mexican shopper goes international, he goes into the U.S. market. So someone in Mexico City can buy something into the U.S. market and have it shipped to Mexico. About 2/3 of non-Mexican e-commerce is derived from the U.S. In terms of banking and transactions, most Mexicans have debit cards rather than credit cards, so debit card is predominant. There is some cash on delivery, but really debit cards and PayPal are the dominant ones and fastest growing for that. So again, just sort of some views on e-commerce as an overview. And here we have two more charts to sort of reinforce some of those views. The top chart there is from a study by ARNI. And I think what's interesting for me is just that retail is growing at 26% per annum, and the service side as well is growing at about that level. Most countries, the retail is growing at double-digit levels, but the service side has already peaked. This gives you an idea of the strength and underlying strength of the Mexican online market. Really, it has still a long way to go before you start to see growth tapering off. When you have the core base of the services still growing at 25% per annum at this level, then you know that you have double-digit growth for several years happening in your market, because the retail is the one that's actually going to be is typically the stronger one. I wanted also to say Mexicans spend actually relatively quite a lot. Their average spend is quite high, and again, the feature about spending on use of smartphone. If you look across the world, Mexico is number 2 in the world for smartphone use after South Korea. So South Korea with 25% of smartphone use, Mexico 15%. The U.S., by the way, is more like 10%. So that's sort of an overview of the e-commerce scene in Mexico. I wanted now to talk a little bit about also website localization. And for me, probably the best way that I can summarize website localization is really to talk about search engines. Because once you understand a little bit how search engines you use, then you can understand why you need and what is a localized website. We have a lot of webinars, by the way, with more detail on this, but I think this, I'm going to try and sort of synthesize it into sort of one slide. Sort of what is a localized website? Well, if you understand that a search engine, and Google it's really convenient for Mexico because it has over 90% market share. It has something like a 96% across all of Latin America. So you really need to make sure that your website follows Google's path and that Google likes your website. So what you need to know about this is that Google, in fact, localizes per market. What that means, pragmatically, is if you have a .com in the U.S., you're sitting in Nebraska and you have a .com U.S. website. If you add a few Spanish pages to your website, you will not be touching or influencing the Mexican market. What that does, what Google says, is that you are a Nebraskan company that has some Spanish pages, and that might be of interest to the people in and around you in Nebraska who speak Spanish. And I believe there are about 35 million native Spanish speakers in America, but that is not the Mexican market. For Mexico, you need a unique destination, you need a unique separate website, which is focused, client-focused, orientated towards the Mexican market. Just to give you an example, Google in the US is very different from Google in the UK, and that's both in English. So you can imagine that Google in English in the US is different from a pure translation of your website. There's a lot of things that need to happen to your website in order for it to really be functioning in the Mexican website, and I'll synthesize this later. I think the key to remember is that you need to optimize it for your visitors. So you need to think, what does my Mexican client, my Mexican business client, my Mexican consumer client, what does he need? How do they search for things? What words would they use? How would they find that important? And then make your website to fit them. So Here's an example of a website that we've done for a client in Mexico. It is a registered name for them in Mexico, so that Google can know that this website is for the Mexican market. It's easy to navigate across different languages as well. It is totally mobile enabled right from the start. It's the built-in mobile enabled website, so that someone in Mexico who's 77% of them on their phones mostly to access the internet, they get it on this. The design is adapted to Mexico as well. We tried to take the pictures that speak most to the Mexican market. It is translated and fully adapted to Mexican Spanish. The words are the words that are used most frequently by Mexican searchers. It's hosted locally, and that is really important for upload and download speed. It has the correct content management system. This is a software behind the website so that it can adapt to multilingual environments. It follows the right regulatory environments. And finally, it's into social media right from the start. And you'll see on the bottom of that website screenshot, it has Facebook and Twitter and things. So these are sort of a quick view of what is a localized website. How do you make a website that appeals to local? You make it market specific and client focused, so that it's client focused for the Mexican client. Right. John, do you want to do a poll now?
Absolutely. Good time for a poll, and a particularly interesting poll related to the subject that we've just been discussing. Here we go. I'm about to launch it, so please, are you ready? Check this one out. Do you have localized websites for your export markets? Number one, would it be yes for all the main export markets, or just a few, or are you thinking about it? Let me give you feedback. A full 70% are saying they're thinking about it. Some 30% are saying yes, but only in a few. Well, that is really very interesting. There you go. That is related to the slides Susanna presented. I'm going to shut that one down, and I'm going to say thank you very much indeed and hand it back to Susanna.
Thank you, John. Right. The thing I want to talk about now is the most amazing characteristic of the Mexican market is that it is incredibly social. The Mexicans seem to be, they seem to talk a lot, and they seem to talk to each other a lot, and they seem to do it online. This is two charts that basically say the same thing. This is the one on the left is from the Mexican Internet Association. I just love it. The question is, how do you access, why do you access the internet? And the question is to check out social media posts. So, I'm sitting in the UK, and most UK people, why do they access the internet? Well, because they need to do their work there, they need to check their emails, they need to Google something and find something. In Mexico, it's to check out your social media network. Now, this is partly because a lot of information is on those social media networks, and we'll get on to that. In terms of preferred social media platforms, Facebook is just out of this world. I mean, in fact, this is a slightly old, it's the latest data, but we now know, Facebook has more like sort of 97% penetration rate amongst internet users it's even gone up from the 92% from that. So it really has this amazing grasp of the Mexican market. And the next online platform is WhatsApp, which is of course owned by Facebook. And WhatsApp is used for group messaging as well, and for forming groups for organizing. But I think the Facebook one is in terms of for businesses is the really interesting one from what we're coming from, because Facebook here would allow you to Facebook is used in Mexico not just to sort of show your party pictures. Facebook is used to communicate daily, but communicate also about events, about things that you use, to ask opinions, and also for advertising. And I'm going to give some examples of what I mean by this in a moment. But I think what's important is that any kind of look into or any kind of ambition into the online world in Mexico has to have this very strong social media strategy right from the very start on that. By the way, LinkedIn is also quite prevalent in Mexico as well. It's quite there. It's the #1 professional database platform that is used. So again, just focusing in more on Facebook itself. Here you have a graph just showing sort of the number of Facebook users. This graph was actually made in mid-2016, and it's already out of date. It's been it's superseded. The numbers actually are hard to pin down, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the growth rate coming up. Excuse me. It is double the use rate, by the way, of the number 2 platform, which is YouTube. And it's clear that really, again, we find that Mexican internet use is dominated by smartphones and Facebook, and as a tool for business. I think those are the three parameters that I would like to go on that. And John, if there's another poll, now's a good time.
Coming up, absolutely. So here we go to go with this slide. Please, are you ready? How do you market internationally? Choices attending the international trade shows, always a must. Online and social media, well, in today's world, 2017, pretty well a must. Paid advertising, distributor manufacturer reps, and visiting international customers and clients. Well, let me give you some feedback, and this information is, of course, going to be available to you on Friday. 50% are fully up there saying trade shows, 40% also doing online and social media, 30% through distributor and reps, and a good number are also visiting prospective international customers. That's great. Thank you for that information. We'll be sharing that, and I hand back to Susanna.
Thank you very much, John. I just want to go through quickly, because I realize we're going on time. I want to go through some quick case studies to show you what we mean by localized website and social media campaigns. I guess the important message for us is, if you're building this localized website, this website that really focuses on your clients and is tailor-made for from your client's perspective, you then need to absolutely use it. This is, for example, a screenshot of a website we made for a U.S. company which sells a lot into Mexico, and here's some examples of how they sell. They basically sell they have distributors throughout Mexico, and they're responsible also for marketing and helping find leads for those distributors. So they have the distributors who are able to distribute the product throughout the country. And as I said, they generate the leads for the distributors or help the distributors find the leads. And how they do that is using social media. So for example, this is a post that we created for that company, and this is a Facebook post, and it was put on one day, and within I think a few days it reached over 142,000 people who had reacted to it, you know, and seen it and reached that, and so nearly 12,000 actually reacted to it and shared it, looked at it, said something about it. What's interesting for us is, of course, Facebook ads allow you to post things and put things out there that don't look like advertisement as such. This is a post that just says basically, hey, what do you think of this car? What would be your favorite car? And do you like this Morgan? And that sort of thing, and tell us what you think about this. So it's not really advertising the product per se, it's engaging a public. And you can see the bar here on the bottom, of the orange bar on the bottom, just how many people that reached and how effective that was. The similar post was done at exactly the same time in the UK market and in the French market. And here's the difference. There's a lot of graphs on this, I apologize. The large one that you see in the middle is Mexico. And this had a total reach of 266,000 people. It engaged about a total amount of nearly 32,000 people, over 32,000 people. It was shared, it was liked, people downloaded it, people reacted to it. It was fantastic. In France, it had about a tenth of this, and in the UK, even less. So really quite there's the same post, same engagement, same amount of effort that went into marketing that post, And actually, we were pretty pleased about the UK and the French reactions. The Mexican reaction just shows you how effective social media is in the Mexican market. So on the bottom left-hand side here, 33,541, that's the number of people it reached in the French market, and 21,337 is the number of people it reached in the UK market. And again, that's a tenth of the size of what it reached in the Mexican market for the same time period and the same post. So it wasn't that the UK and the French posts were not good; they were seen as successful. Mexican post is outstanding, and these are leads that are then fed to the distributors. It's really great. So just in conclusion, I wanted to sort of just round things out by saying, yes, from Anna and I both agree, Mexico is really at a tipping point in terms of its business. It is a large, good growth market. There are some challenges, yes, and there are some very strong specifics to the market. And Anna's a great help there about pointing out those and helping smooth the way for exporters. On an online basis, it is a tremendously fantastic market to go into. It's very mobile orientated, it's very urban, very fast moving, highly engaged, just as we saw at that example of the social media, and you get great returns. I haven't really elaborated on this. The little box you see there is the price you pay for Google ad spend, Facebook ad spend. So for example, if you wanted to post something, the same post would cost $0.001 per view in Mexico, and cost 0.04 in the UK. Same post, same ad, same terms. So really, the Mexico market is also a very profitable market with great returns, very engaged, and not expensive. So hopefully, I've left a bit of time for questions. And I'd also like to encourage you to visit our website and check out other resources that we have and other webinars that you can download when you have a moment. So John, I hope I've left a little bit of time as well for some, or perhaps, are there any questions?
There are indeed. There are many, many questions. We're not going to be able to cover them all. I'm going to keep it short because we are a little bit late, but I want to say, Susanna, I want to say, Anna, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Anna, please, a quick question here. For Mexico, do I need more than one distributor? And it goes on to ask, what is the best way to divide them, by city or by region?
Very good question. Usually what we recommend is to divide it by regions. But if you talk about region, we're talking about the north region will be the city of Monterrey, and then maybe have another one in the west in Guadalajara, and then another one in Mexico City. In that way, you will cover most of the Mexico market. And if you're in Florida, I would recommend also to have maybe someone in the Yucatan Peninsula area. So basically, we're talking maybe 2 or 3 distributors to cover most of the main cities of Mexico.
Anna, thank you. That was very interesting. And related to that, we saw earlier on in this webinar how one of the main challenges is all about finding distributors or finding the right partners. So Susanna, here's a sort of question. I'm a manufacturer with a website that has been developed for the US, so it's US. What should be my first steps for getting online in Mexico? And can that help them find distributors, I guess, is one of the questions.
A great double-barreled question. Excellent. I think our first step would be to make sure that you own your domain name. Just as Anna was saying about registering your trademarks and registering things for Mexico, you need to register your domain name and buy it. These things are not usually very expensive. $20 will get you a domain name. But make sure that you own this. This is part of your brand. This is the ownership of your online brand. So that's not something you want to hand over to your distributor. That's something we see pretty often. Now, what we do typically is to build websites that then allow, with that URL, with that .mx or .com MX for the Mexican market. Build a website and then use the website to effectively appeal and grow distributor base. So use social media, put out there the fact that you're looking for a distributor, and we've had, it's time and again, it shows that if you've invested in your website, your distributor will find you, and the best distributors usually do. they're looking out for good products, and they see a company that has invested and cares enough about their target export market to actually build out a Mexican website and have a social media strategy in that market, then they know that that's a company that they want to work with. And that's what we see again and again. So just to summarize, first step is own your domain name. Own your .mx or .com.mx. Don't hand that to a user distributor. Use it to as a platform for finding distributors and allowing distributors to find you. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much. Anna, I know you did talk about NAFTA, but it's clearly getting a lot of interest here. There are several questions about NAFTA. So Anna, how do you see NAFTA? Can you touch on NAFTA again?
Sure. I think in general, the negotiations will be, I got to say that I think Mexican government's pro-NAFTA, and even the U.S. government and the U.S. businesses is pro-NAFTA, even Canada. So I think the NAFTA will go on. I think it was more political issues. The new administration are trying to say that Mexico, the U.S. did not benefit from NAFTA, which is wrong. If we didn't have NAFTA in place, just think in the 80s and 90s, a lot of the business from the U.S. were going to China, right? So everything was in China. But now with NAFTA in place, most of the business are between the three economies, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. So instead of you manufacture things in Mexico, okay, maybe the labor force is in Mexico, but we get from the U.S., we get raw materials, we get tooling, we get software, we get a lot of things from the U.S. So you benefit and we're benefit at the same time. So I think that in general, they're going to see the advantages of having the NAFTA in place. There are going to be changes, of course, but the NAFTA is going to continue. That's my own impression. But it's going to be a tough negotiation, but I think it will continue.
Yeah, Anna, thank you for that. I guess I should also give a little bit, I mean, I would agree with you there. Yesterday I was at a presentation and there was U.S. Secretary of Commerce of Trade, Wilbur Ross was there. He had some interesting comments to make about NAFTA and talked more informationally about updating it. And there were specific examples that were talked about. There was automobile and there was agriculture that was sort of dived into. So I think I completely concur from the point of view, I think there's a level of smoothness that we're going to see as it gets updated and specifics. E-commerce was also mentioned as one of the things that isn't even mentioned in the agreement and that they're seeking to bring it up to date. So what we took away was they're talking about updating it. So more in that direction. Susanna, I think we're going to have to move to him. There is a question. What is your perspective on the use of professional translation versus understanding who I'm struggling with this question, using people who understand the industry as a distributor but may not be professional translators? So it's a kind of translation question.
Yeah, we get that quite a lot.
Okay.
Our view is to use professional translators who are native speakers in that country. So for your Mexican website, make sure it's a Mexican translator who's using it. I think the big lesson for us is things like Google Translate and such. They have a place. They do have a role to play, but not for your whole website. It just makes you look like a poor second. It's just not good enough. So it's worth the extra mile to make sure that you're being translated by a professional. That's not to say as well, though, that it would be that you should exclude any professional in the business. So we often will circle back and sort of get the local distributor involved. That's a fantastic way of reaching out to increase the web, the importance of the web to all the other parts of the business, to local distributors across, for example, Mexico. So if you've got distributors in Mexico, they can certainly play a role in updating and translating the website. But I think the key for us is use native speakers, professional translators. Get assistance when you can from local partners like distributors. Don't use Google Translate for your online, for your website. It does have a use for other areas, even for social media sometimes, and for quick responses, but not for permanent things like websites. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, Susanna, I suppose it's got to be true. If you're going to do it well, do it properly. Anna, I guess it's a surprising question, perhaps not though, but safe to travel to Mexico? Well, there you go. That's a question. What's your view?
Okay, we get that question quite often.
Okay.
There are areas of Mexico that I would not recommend to travel. But if you're traveling to the main Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico, it is quite safe. And usually what we recommend is that when you arrive to Mexico, take a taxi that you know, or maybe do your preparations on beforehand. So, and then that will take you to the hotel, and usually you will have someone that will assist you moving around in Mexico. I would say it's quite safe, except for some areas like Guerrero, is a very difficult area, and the north part of Mexico, Tampico, in that area. But if you're in other areas, you will be okay. I mean, I've lived in Mexico, and I've never had any problems. And like any city, even if I go to New York City, if you don't know your way around, you go to the wrong places, you can have problems. So I will say the same recommendation in Mexico. Just make sure that you, you're not going to come down in Mexico with a Rolex in your hand. Just don't do that. I mean, normal security issues like in going to any big cities around the world.
I guess that's an excellent and reassuring and wise response. Thank you so much, Anna. A question, Susanna, this I guess must be the last as we move forward. This one is about social media, and again coming back to finding distributors. So a big focus on finding distributors is obviously a major concern. How can you find Mexican distributors?
Thank you, John. I think it's a big concern because I think a lot of people, you know, this is one of the things that people struggle with a lot. And I know from Anna's point of view, you know, finding good local partners and vetting them is certainly one of her key attributes and one of her key specialities. How we found it useful is, as I said, to create a platform to use the social media. So you create your Mexican website and then create a social media campaign that goes with it. So there's two obvious ones. The first is to attach a contact page onto your Mexico website that simply says, and you can even post it on your front page, interested in becoming a distributor? Contact us. And you can do a lot of the vetting, the initial vetting of that distributor online as well. So, you know, you can have little forms for them to fill out, which say, you know, which does a lot of the sorting out before you even have to sort of, you know, have meetings and so on. And that's a pretty useful thing. The second then is to have, so that's sort of, you know, passive, that's someone's coming across your website, but then have a very active role through social media, on LinkedIn and on Facebook, pushing out your product and saying, we are actively looking for distributors. One thing we find as well is if you're going to trade shows, in Mexico, or if you're in trade shows in the States where you know there'll be a large Mexican contingent and you're looking for distributors, that's often a good place. The distributors are often there. That's a good place to look for them. And we will design social media campaigns that target trade shows for distributor searches. You know, this has had a pretty good track record. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that the distributors see the amount of effort, investment that you've made goes a long way to saying we really care about the Mexican market. We know about this market. We're not here just on a short-term basis. We really want to invest. We really want to invest also in our distributors, and we do this in a very professional way. So that it, you know, naturally appeals to the very best kind of distributors. If you can show that you know their market, then I think that you get a better uptick from them. Thank you, John.
Yeah, what a great response. Thank you so much. Very practical, as this webinar should have been. And considering the time, I really have to say we have to shut down now. I want to thank everybody for participating today. Thank you for joining us on this webinar today. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you found lots of useful information, lots of takeaways, lots of help there to grow your exports and your brands and your business in Mexico. And on behalf of us, I would like to, here we go, let's get some applause out there that is to say thank you to Susanna, thank you Anna, and on behalf of us all, what a great webinar. Do stay with us a moment or two more because the survey is coming through and you will get this recording on Friday. So again, finally, one last thank you to Susanna, one last thank you to Anna. What a great job. What a great job done for developing business, sales, brands online in Mexico. Thank you again and goodbye.